Right. All right. We're back with Lloyd de Jongh over here, and he's way up in Poland. It is about 6 or 7 hours difference. I can never remember how many hours difference we have, but certainly thousands of miles away. And yet here we are, right next to you, looking right like we're next to each other, and we're talking to you about Sharia law. Now, what we're going to do, and I've asked Lloyd to specifically talk about this problem that Muslims have with criticism or mockery or anything to do with critiquing Muhammad as a prophet. We do know the reference to back in 622 when Muhammad first moved to Medina. He was from Mecca. He was not from Medina. And while he was there in Medina, almost immediately, there was a woman called Asma bint Marwan. Asma bint Marwan was a native to Medina. She was a not part of the Ansar group, but she did not like this new upstart who had come from Mecca, who was created this Treaty of Medina where he became arbiter between man and God. And so she started mocking him, which would be natural. This is what we do. And we do this in the West. It's called sarcasm, and there's an enormous amount of mockery that we do in our press. We have the freedoms to do so. Thank God we have the freedoms to do so. But this was not the case back in the 7th century. And it caused Muhammad so much anger that he said, who's going to take care of this woman for me? That evening, one of his disciples, Umar, who was half blind, went to her house, went into her bedroom. She had 6 children. She was suckling her youngest child. And he takes the knife and he plunges it through her heart while she's suckling her baby, comes back the next morning and tells Muhammad what he had done. Muhammad turns to him and says, blessed are you for what you have done for your prophet. So patting him on the back, giving him a blessing for having killed this woman to stop her mockery. So there is just one story. There are many other stories where Muhammad had others killed. We know at least 25 people we know that he had assassinated for different crimes. But this one on mockery, this one on criticism is what we want to talk about today. Because this has now raised its head, and we have the C-295 law, which is in Pakistan, which stipulates that if you criticize the Quran or criticize Muhammad, it is a capital offense. What in the world is a law doing like that in the 21st century in a place called Pakistan? Britain, back in 2006, I was living in Britain. I remember when this was going on. The Labour Party, who was in power at that time, were told by Muslims that they want to stop all criticism of 2 things, of the Quran and of Muhammad. And they said that this is against their religion. This is a desecration of everything they believe, and that we demand. They weren't asking for capital punishment. They were asking for 7 years in prison if you mocked or criticized the Prophet Muhammad, which I did almost on a daily basis. Back then, that was my whole oeuvre. That's what I did. That was my ministry. And so they put it to, in the way it works in Britain, you take it from the House of Commons, which had a majority, and they send it to the House of Lords. And then the House of Lords looks at it, and they didn't like it. They didn't think this was relevant, so they sent it back and said it needs to be revived. And it went back and forth 3 times, which is as much as you can do before finally the House of Commons could vote on it. And each time the House of Lords tried to diminish it, the Muslims would not let them do that. So finally, it came before the House of Commons in 2006. There were thousands of us outside of Parliament that day. I was there, and we were saying, do not pass this law, because if you pass this law, I would have to leave the country. I would have to leave and come back to the United States. I would no longer be able to continue with my ministry. So they had a vote, and they lost by 1 vote. Let me repeat that. I don't know if you remember this, Lloyd. Do you remember this?
I do vaguely recall
religious hatred law. It was called incitement to religious hatred law. They lost by 1 vote, and the 1 vote was Tony Blair's vote, who was the prime minister at that time, who saw what was happening, stepped outside the door. By simply stepping outside the door, his vote wouldn't count. Because if he had stayed inside, he would have had to vote with the Labour Party, and he would have been the majority vote. And as a result, it was not passed by 1 vote. That's how close we came to imposing incitement to religious hatred law. I know Hillary Clinton wanted to bring this in the United Nations. She wanted to make this a universal law that you must not criticize the Quran, you must not criticize the Prophet. Now, Lloyd, in the 21st century we're talking about, 2006, In Europe, in Britain, this almost passed because the Muslims were behind it. Why are the Muslims so, what is going on here? What is the impetus for the Muslims wanting to have a law like this? Where is it coming from? Because to me, that makes no sense. No Christian would stipulate or have a law saying that if you denigrate Jesus Christ or criticize his name, you must be put in prison for 7 years. Or in the case of the Muslims, they would like it to be a capital offense. Help me here, Lloyd. Give us some background. I know I don't, I would love to see where this is in the Quran, but you say that it is actually in other places. So over to you. Help us with this and tell us the background to this.
You're welcome, Jay. Thank you very much for having me back. So there are numerous laws that apply here. I've mentioned to you in private conversation, ghibba and namima, slander and tale-bearing. I'm not going to go in depth on that, but very briefly, in Western law, slander is to lie about someone and damage their reputation. In Islamic law, to slander someone is to say something that is perfectly true, but which they would not like to be revealed. So in Islam, to slander someone is to say something true, which they wouldn't like to be revealed. Slander is also to worsen relationships between two people, even if what you say is perfectly true. So, and we'll get into the ramifications of that later, but specifically I want to go into their law, which is called Sab al-Rasul, which is insulting the Prophet. And this is one of the things that they need to implement as much as they can. Under full Sharia, the penalty for insulting Muhammad is death. And of course, insulting Muhammad generally incurs a far greater penalty than insulting Allah, which is a really interesting point, which shows us that Muhammad actually has precedence over Allah. And the major Sharia manual on this is written by the Sheikh al-Islam. Right. I've mentioned in the past the four Mujtahid Mutlaq, the four Imams who founded the schools of fiqh. These are the absolute scholars, effectively the perfect scholars, who are infallible, cannot be incorrect. Above them, there is one additional scholar, just below Muhammad himself, Muhammad Al-Ghazali, who died in the early 12th century. He is the Hujjat al-Islam, the proof of Islam. Below them, so you have Ghazali, then you have the four scholars of the founders of the schools of fiqh, and below them you have another approximately 30 scholars with the title Sheikh al-Islam. You do have Sheikh al-Islam today, however, these 30 earlier scholars have had a profound impact on the development of Islam and of course also Sharia. Now we're going to look at, and I'll share my screen, and you can see
before we get on real quickly, just going back to that, unshare your screen just a bit.
Sure.
Now, before we go on, let me just ask you this. All of these scholars, you're talking about Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali, in that order, and those are all from the 8th and 9th century. Then you have Al-Ghazali from the 11th century. The other 30 are from what centuries? Do you know off the top of your head, or just kind of give me a rough estimate?
They would, I would guess you're looking at the 9th to the 14th centuries.
Okay. So they're not modern scholars. None of them are modern scholars.
No, Sharia took in total about 900 years to evolve. Okay. It wasn't instant. It is the greatest intellectual output of the scholars of Islam. It's the greatest intellectual achievement. It is their copy of the Talmud, which actually makes the Imams the Pharisees of Islam.
Okay. But they are all old. They're at least 600 years old and older. There are not any in the last 600 years that have come to that status.
No, the older ones have a special status. They certainly do have a special status.
Some of the big ones that we have today, Sheikh Khomeini, well, he's a Shiite, so he wouldn't be there, but Yusuf Qaradawi, considered to be the most knowledgeable and the most highly respected cleric today, he would not be in that group at all, or there would not be a subgroup?
No, all Muslims are subject to the doctrine of taqlid. They are followers. They follow in the footsteps. They follow the traditions. So he is a muqallid. He follows the doctrine of taqlid. He must follow other scholars who preceded him. The ijma is set. It is permanent. It was finished roughly 900 years ago. So he cannot reinterpret what has been established within the Sharia, the ijma that is done.
Isn't that fascinating? Because the whole context of law must mean that it must be relevant for the day that it's being used. None of these, one of the things that you're coming up with over and over again, and we're going to see this repeated, is that almost everything you're coming up with is irrelevant, but it fits in the century that these these lads were actually writing.
They can make fatwa today, but a fatwa is a non-binding decision. All the binding decisions, all of the substrate is within the Sharia and the fiqh, which was developed many hundreds of years ago.
Fascinating. Okay, back to you.
So what I have here is, and I will provide, Jay, I'll provide you the necessary references, and if you can pin them in a comment or put them in the description, there'll be 3 texts I will refer to here. This is the summary of the Unsheathed Sword against the one who insults the messenger, as you can see, by the Sheikh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah. This is the man that, of course, ISIS followed because he is the grandfather of jihad within Islam. He is the prime scholar of jihad in Islam. Also, he is one of the 4 primary scholars of anti-Christian polemics within Islam. So let's go to this book, right? Let's see what this tells us. So I'm going to read this. So the first issue, whoever insults the Prophet is to be killed, whether they are Muslim or a disbeliever. That's chapter 1. The second issue, killing is prescribed on him, the one who insults the Prophet, and it is not permissible to imprison or show favor to him or to ransom him. The third issue, any Muslim or non-Muslim who insults the Prophet is to be killed, and repentance is not sought from him. Let's continue. In the opening of the book, the contents of this book concern the Islamic ruling upon those who insult the final prophet and messenger, Muhammad. He has an unparalleled status. So distortions, so they're discussing not to refute the distortions and fabrications of the enemies of Islam concerning him. So anyone who says anything about Muhammad is immediately an enemy of Islam. Let's have a look here. Within this section, the objective of this work was to clarify the Islamic ruling on this subject. That's the fiqh on the subject. The first issue, the one who insults Muhammad is to be killed, whether Muslim or disbeliever. They are to be killed even if they pay a protective tax in a Muslim state. And they want to provide clarification of what constitutes insulting. Let's continue. Whoever insults the Prophet is to be killed. This is the general view of the scholars. The generality of the scholars have consensus that whoever insults Muhammad is to be killed. Malik, Layth, Ahmad, Ishaq, and Ash-Shafi also said this. These are the founders of the schools of fiqh and other scholars. The Muslims have unanimous agreement. When they say the Muslims, they mean the Mujtahids, the scholars. Upon killing whoever insults the Prophet, it is the ruling that whoever insults other than Muhammad is to be lashed. And remember, a lashing can kill you. This would be a whipping or a beating with a stick. This consensus is taken to be the consensus from the Tabi'in and the companions of Allah's Messenger. Let's continue. So now with regards to Muhammad, there is consensus upon the obligation of killing such a person. The Muslims have a consensus that whoever insults Allah or insults his messenger or rejects anything from what has been revealed by Allah, so this is non-Muslims who do not accept Islam, then such a person is a disbeliever. And I do not know anyone who differed concerning the obligation of killing such a person. So this, of course, would be one of the bases for jihad, which is, there's a legal definition, there are colloquial definitions of jihad, there's also the legal definition, the Shari definition of jihad, which is warfare upon non-Muslims to make them accept Islam. Now, Muhammad bin Sahnun said, the scholars have consensus that whoever insults the messenger, who attributes a defect to him, such a person is a disbeliever. And as they say here, there's an obligation towards killing disbelievers. The Muslim who insults Muhammad is killed. There being no disagreement concerning that. This is the view of the 4 imams and others.
Probably the best example that I can think of off the top of my head is this bodyguard of one of the home ministers in Pakistan, who's a Christian. Sorry, he was a Muslim. Sorry, he was not a Christian. He was a Muslim, but he supported the annulment of C-295 law, which is the law that you're talking about. And that is that anybody who insults the Prophet or the Quran, it's a capital offense, must be killed. And he was saying this is not relevant for today. His bodyguard then kills him on the way to work. And his bodyguard is put into prison, and there are riots outside the prison to release him because he's a hero, because he is seen as just and honorable. Yes. And as he is led to his execution, this is the bodyguard for having killed him, they throw flowers at him. And they almost had to do it behind closed doors because he's become such a honorary figure, and there are now statues to him, to the bodyguard, for having fulfilled what the Prophet had demanded, what you're saying right here.
Yes. Under Western law, that is a crime. Under Islamic law, he has done no wrong whatsoever. In fact, he has honored Allah.
Yeah, and he's elevated by everybody for having done the just thing.
And to answer your previous question, see this line here: the Muslim and disbeliever are to be killed.
Good. Okay, so it's both and. It's not just for Muslims.
Sharia, correct. Sharia applies to non-Muslims too.
Okay, are you all listening to this? This is highly important because this goes way beyond just in-house laws and rules and regulations, since you can't just say this is only just for the Muslims for their own private use. No, this is for you as well. You're going to be imputed on this if Islam ever comes to your country or ever comes to your community. God forbid that they start imposing Sharia law, because look at its application. This is from, remember, this is from the 1300s. This is from 14th century by Ibn Taymiyyah. This is not any floozy. This is not any sideshow. This is actually the real thing. This is actually at the whole orthodoxy of Islam.
Correct. So in several hadith, the hadith of the blind man who killed a woman when he heard her insulting the Prophet. So this hadith is now used to legislate from. This hadith is valid. It is not abrogated. It has now been included as a source of law.
Okay, that's the story of Mus'ab bin Marwan we're talking about there.
And notice they state here that Imam Ahmad, repentance is not to be sought. So there is no repentance. You are killed on the spot. No, yes?
I mean, stop and think that through. One of the reasons, I mean, it underlines what you said previously, and that is you're guilty until proven innocent. In the West, you're innocent until proven guilty. The reason why you don't enact punishment, whatever the punishment is so that the guilty party can prove their innocence, so that they have time to say, no, I didn't say this, or no, I didn't do this, or no, I wasn't there, or you've got the wrong person, or there may be a reason why. There's a reason why, because I was being attacked. I was defending myself. I mean, that's the whole premise of Western law. You are given, they're even given a defense counsel. If they can't afford it, the state gives them a counsel to defend for them. That's how we've all lived. And that's why so many people want to come to the West, because we have that kind of law. What you're saying here is there's no recompense. There's no law. There's no court case. There's no way that the person who is being accused can defend themselves. And that's why you've had almost kangaroo courts. And we see this over and over again, where crowds come and they start stoning. I just saw last week where someone was actually burned to death because they said they actually, the criticism is that they criticized the Prophet. It could be well that he said nothing, but somebody didn't like this person, or they owed this person, because a lot of times it's when you owe somebody that you make up something about that person, so justice can be enacted against them. But this, to me, is horrendous, because this gives no recourse for the person, regardless of whether the law is right or wrong. It's obviously wrong to begin with, because it eradicates any freedom of speech. To stipulate that even the defendant has no recourse, to me, is abhorrent.
Right. And notice, says that the Muslim and disbeliever are killed, and there is no difference of opinion narrated from him concerning the killing. They're speaking here about Shafi, and there's a reason they mention Shafi, because he's the one who really established the direction of the Sharia. He really founded the philosophy, the legal philosophy behind the Sharia. So there is no difference concerning the killing. So I'll mention one or two more passages. You'll notice it just goes on like this for page after page. All of them mentioned, these are the major scholars of Islam, that the one who insults the messenger is to be killed. Shafi, then it is reported from him that insulting the Prophet breaks the covenant, and such a person is to be killed. Insulting the Prophet necessitates that they be killed. I think that is fairly explanatory, right? When a person does this repeatedly, it is for the Imam to kill them, right? And they must increase upon the fixed punishment prescribed by the Sharia. So if you were to be lashed, you could be killed. Take that which comes concerning the Prophet and his companions of killing due to the likes of these reasons. They call this the political killing. In other words, political assassination. Islam condones political assassination. It is for the Imam to give a discretionary punishment with killing. In other words, an Imam can order a hit. An Imam can order a political assassination. There are texts from them that the one who insults the messenger is to be killed. Do you understand now that an Imam is a political post? Islam is a political religion, which we will define in the near future, and you can be killed at the orders of an Imam. This is why so many Imams are arrested for having weapons and for being behind terror. I'll leave this here and then I'll go to two other short things I want to add. But your comments, Jay?
No, I mean, to me, you've underlined everything that we have been fearful about Islam, and this is one of the difficulties that so many of us in the West fear if Islam comes and actually starts incorporating itself in our countries, because this will have to be enacted, and this is the difficulty for any of us who leave and go to Muslim countries today, myself included. If we were to say anything critical, we would be thrown out of the country. But if we were to live in the country and continue to say that, we could be executed as well. Horrendous.
Right. Now notice they do quote the Quran here. They do refer to the Quran, fight against those who believe not in Allah. That may sound familiar, right?
That's 839.
It is not permissible to leave them alone until they are in a subdued state. So Muslims must continue to harass non-Muslims until we are in a subdued state. They speak of jizya and okay, so understand you must fight the leaders of disbelief. And I will now just go back briefly to this section here, right, which says that there is consensus from the Islamic scholars that whoever insults Muhammad, who attributes a defect, in other words, Muhammad is perfect, the perfect man. He is what's known as the Insan al-Kamil, then such a person is a disbeliever. So let's have a look at this within the Sharia law. See this ruling here on not loving the Prophet. This is the reliance of the traveler, section P75.2. Not loving the Prophet more than all people. So the Prophet said, none of you believes, none of you is a true Muslim until I am more beloved to you than your wife, your child, your life, and all people. And in fact, Kermani says, love of the Prophet means the will to obey him and not disobey him, this being one of the obligations of Islam. So in other words, you will love the Lord your Muhammad with all your heart, all your life, all your money, more than everything else in the world. Muhammad is the counterfeit Jesus. In fact, if you read the Sirah, he is effectively Jesus. He is the partner of Allah. He was created before the world was created. In fact, in the Sirah, the world was created for Muhammad. Allah made the world for Muhammad. Muhammad was present at the creation. So I'll end this and I'll go to one more section. Now, none of you believes until his inclinations conform to what I have brought. This is what Muhammad has brought, right? And Nawawi says, this means a person must examine his acts in the light of the Quran and Sunnah, suspending his inclinations, his own thought, his own will, following, okay, taqlid, what the Prophet has brought. The hadith resembles the word of Allah Most High. When Allah and his messenger have decided a matter, no believer, male or female, has a choice in their affair. Quran 33:36. However, the Quran is interpreted through these scholars that I've mentioned. And they will provide the interpretation of this. And so I will show one more thing. Now, we are not allowed to insult Islam. We're not allowed to insult Muhammad. It is the death, literally the death penalty. Let's have a look at what Ibn Taymiyyah, now Ibn Taymiyyah has written a very lengthy, very detailed book, which I've read on anti-Christian polemics. But let's have a look at his student. Right, let's look at the words of Ibn Taymiyyah's contemporary and student Ibn Qayyim in one of the two most common Islamic anti-Christian polemics, which are still read and still enjoyed by Muslims today. So this one is called, actually let's go up here, this one is called Guidance to the Uncertain in Reply to the Jews and the Christians. Guidance to the Uncertain in Reply to the Jews and the Christians. So this chapter is called The Prayer of the Christians Ridicules God. The prayer of the Christians ridicules the worshipped deity. So, Christians chose a way of prayer during which the most devoted would consider it no great matter if he happens to pass urine dripping on his thighs and legs while praying. Then he would take the direction of the east, make the sign of the cross over his face, and worship the crucified deity while urinating on himself. And then he would open a conversation with whoever is sitting beside him in church, and the chat would be about matters like the price of wine or pork, who won in gambling, what dish he prepared at home, and the like. And then he would even interrupt his prayer to talk about similar things, and then the Christian would urinate in his seat, if he can. This is probably the second most popular anti-Christian polemic in Islam.
Wow.
After the book by Ibn Taymiyyah. So hopefully you understand. Now, they speak here of Jesus. They say that Jesus entered the vagina of a woman who eats, drinks, urinates, evacuates her bowels, and menstruates. Then Jesus got attached to the inside of her abdomen and dwelled there for 9 months, wobbling between excrement, urine, and menstrual blood. This is where they get their polemics. This is a 900-year-old polemic, which is still around today. And this book is just filled with this kind of language, this kind of imagery.
This is just filthy.
Yes, this is Islam. This is Islam.
It is almost, it sounds like just kids in, kids who are trying to outdo themselves in filth. You know how little kids do out in the playground during break, and they say these kind of stories just to one up. And this is an adult saying.
Now, understand this from a Christian point of view, from a Western point of view. This is slander in the sense that it is saying something untrue, false about someone to smear them, to smear their image, to harm their image. Whereas when we quote Islamic law, when we quote the Quran, when we quote the Hadith accurately, perfectly, we are committing slander. In Islamic law, telling the truth is slander if someone wouldn't like it to be said. If it harms relationships, for instance, if it creates friction, that is slander and tale-bearing, and that is illegal, that is a crime.
Okay, so you're saying
telling the truth is a crime.
Even when you're reporting their own material.
Correct. That is slander and tale-bearing. Yes, that is a crime. I can go into that in another time, but that's slightly off topic. But yes, we can cover that in the future. Yeah.
Well, no, it is very much on topic, because that's one thing we always do. We always make sure we quote them correctly. We make sure
that is slander.
We read the verses as they are in black and white. We make sure.
Why are you so hateful, Jay? Why are you spreading hate?
So this is
why are you slandering?
It's the intent, is what you're saying. The intent is slander. You're doing it for slander. It's not the verse itself that's slanderous.
No, they have various. So there are certain. Look, there are layers and there are overlapping laws. But when you say something that it's illegal, as we showed the sub-article, it is illegal. It is a crime to infer that Muhammad or Islam are less than perfect. They cannot be anything other than absolutely perfect.
It's not just repeating what Muhammad
said. Anything that creates doubt in Islam is a crime. Anything that would create doubt, and this must be resisted, and this must be fought against. And in fact, the person speaking against it must be stopped, so that this doubt is prevented.
Which is an oxymoron when you stop and think, and it actually is. You can see this is a real problem, because we're causing all kinds of cognitive dissonance for Muslims, because all we're doing is quoting their material. We're quoting his things. We're quoting his actions. We're quoting Quranic verses. To say that that's slanderous by virtue of the fact it is their own authority that we're quoting is, to me, absolutely horrific. Is absolutely ironic and laughable. And they're not even thinking it through. They're not even realizing. So when they quote it, it's not slanderous. When we quote it, it is slanderous. And the reason is because it's coming out of our mouths and not theirs. It's the intent that goes with it. And I would suggest our intent is to show how irrelevant it is.
Intent has a name in Islam. It's called niyyah.
Okay.
Right? If your intent is good, then it is good. Even if your action is objectively by our standards evil, but if you, as a Muslim, for instance, as we discussed previously, if you desecrate a church, your intent was good. Therefore, it is good. When that bodyguard killed that man, his intent was good. Even if his act is evil, God judges the action by the intention, not by the action. Whereas you are seeking to undermine Islam, therefore you are committing a crime. Your intention is evil. Therefore, you are a criminal.
Okay. All right. That's understandable. All right. Well, listen, this has been fascinating. This is I hope people are picking up what you're saying, Lloyd. You've given us a eyeful by looking at the Unsheathed Sword, which is the book written by Ibn Taymiyyah. Just to be careful, just so people are aware, Ibn Taymiyyah was not accepted during his lifetime. In fact, he was in prison for the last part of his life, and he actually died in prison. So at that point, it was not acceptable in the 1300s. Later, then, he became very popular, and he was made most popular by Ibn al-Wahhab in the 1700s. And Wahhabism, if you look at Wahhabism, which comes out of Arabia, today called Saudi Arabia, back then it wasn't, Ibn al-Wahhab was the one that popularized Ibn Taymiyyah and made him a household name all over the world. But during his lifetime, when he was coming up with this, it's fascinating. His school was looked down upon by the majority. And you can see why, just from the way we've been unpacking it today. What Lloyd and I have been saying as he brings us to the fore, some of these chapter after chapter after chapter, they talk about just killing anybody who criticizes or mocks the prophet. I mean, you don't even have to mock, just criticize the prophet. You must be killed. The four mujtahids are all agreed upon this. Al-Ghazali, who is the head, the one that they go to that has superseding even the four mujtahid, is very clear that anybody who mocks the prophet or criticizes it either must be lashed. And I would suggest what probably that means is you lash them till they're dead, is what I'm suggesting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Probably.
Or is it just 100
there's no penalty for them in killing you.
All right. So I know in when it comes to adultery in chapter 24, verse 2, that's 100 lashes. You're not dead after 100 lashes. But in this case, it may be right till they're dead. Now, what's the Qur'anic support? I was interested on the verse that you gave for the Qur'anic support, Lloyd. I want to just read it to you. I've got it right here. It's chapter 8, verse 39. Listen to the word. Let's just unpack it, because this is hugely significant. And fight then them, that means the people, until there is no more fitna. Fitna means disbelief or view of polytheism, worshiping others besides Allah. And so fight them until there is no more fitna. And the religion, which is Islam, will all be for Allah alone. In other words, they are to fight us until we all acquiesce and believe in Allah alone and his prophet Muhammad. So it's not just that they are, basically what they're saying is this is also a form of da'wah. This is a form of actually mission. It's a whole missional intent as well. You come under the subservience of Allah. You come under the subservience of Islam by injuncting and imposing a killing of those who mock. It's to shut down any criticism, shut down any mockery, and that they all become Muslims. They all come under Allah's control. Now, what I want to talk about, I wanted to end with this. When you referred to the guidance to the uncertain by Qayyim, who was a disciple
student of Ibn Taymiyyah,
of Ibn Taymiyyah, and his crassness, slander against Christians, even slander against Jesus Christ, referring to, as he does, to what he says of Jesus in the womb. And just,
we love Jesus.
We do love him. And you can see that this...
No, but Muslims will tell you, we love Jesus.
They can't. How can they with this kind of material?
Yeah.
Obviously, they don't. This is, it's a contradiction in terms. But you notice the very thing that they are demanding of us, they don't do of themselves. There's a double standard here.
Hypocrisy.
They say you must not criticize, you must not mock, but look what they do with Jesus Christ. And they do it so easily. Talking about, there he is in the womb as and what he is, where he is between, what objects and what material that he is between, just desecrating his name, desecrating that whole experience. And it is a mockery of, are you saying this? Is this what you're saying? Is this what you Christians have done to Jesus? In some ways, they're saying they're elevating Jesus by mocking us for saying, look at your great. So I understand that side of it. But the very thing they're criticizing us for is what they're doing themselves. This is hypocrisy in its highest form. But then the question comes, and I want to end with this. Why in the world are they so intent? Why are they so intent with shutting down any criticism or shutting down any mockery of Muhammad? Obviously, you could say could be one of two reasons. One is could be Muhammad can't be defended. That could be a problem. That's a real problem. I love the fact that Jesus can be defended on every category. For 2,000 years, they've been mocking him. For 2,000 years, they've been criticizing him. And for 2,000 years, he's still as strong today as the day he was living. Mock him as much as you want. He defends himself. He is that strong that he defends himself. But there's another reason, and I think this is probably the one that Muslims need to listen to. Why have they elevated Muhammad so high? Why have they put him up there right alongside Allah? Why is he in the Shahada? Why is it that they have put him up there? And this is what I'm going to end with. I think the reason that they cannot have criticism of him, they've elevated him so high, is because they don't have what we have. You know, this whole thing that he is closer to me than my brother, he's closer to me than my father, he's closer to me than my best friend. Well, that comes straight out of the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's what we say about Jesus. They want what we have. And their God is so distant, Remember, Allah never has entered time and space. Allah never came to earth. Allah has no relationship with humanity. Never walked and talked in the cool of the day. Never was there wrestling with Jacob. Allah never was there leading the children of Israel as a fire during the night and as a pillar of cloud during the day. That does not exist. There are no typologies in the Quran of Allah anywhere close to humanity. And everybody wants to know God face to face. We all need to know God, who he is. If Allah is so distant and so other, and they look and see what Jesus has and who he is to us, and Jesus did come and walk and talk with us and ate with us and actually died for us. They want what we have. They need what we've got. In every category, they have elevated him to the status of Jesus. He is, as you say, he is the false Jesus. And I think for this reason, they have, if that's why when you look at the Quran, all these verses about Muhammad all the way through, it's not, his name is not there. It's the prophet, the prophet, the prophet, the prophet. They put that name to it after the fact and redacted it back into those verses. They need what we already have. They need a God who is close to them. They need a God who actually walks and talks with them and is able to relate to them face to face. And they cannot have it. They will not have it. Therefore, they replace Muhammad with that. No wonder you are not permitted to criticize him. No wonder you cannot mock him.
Jay, if you look at the Sharia and you look at the Sirah, the Gospels of Muhammad, I know people call them the biographies, but they are the Gospels of Muhammad.
Yeah.
You will discover that Muhammad is the first creation of Allah. So Allah created Muhammad out of himself. He took a piece of his own light and essence and he shaped Muhammad's spirit. So the spirit was with Allah when he created the universe and created the earth. And then Allah created the universe and the earth from the spirit of Muhammad. So the universe is created from the spirit. Now, you mentioned that Allah is distant. Allah, where is Allah, right? Nobody knows. So because Allah is outside of the realm of the knowable, he left his regent, Muhammad, who keeps the world spinning, who keeps the universe running. You see, it's the spirit of Muhammad, the Ruh Muhammadi, that keeps the world running. You will find this written within the various Sharia texts. So Allah has made Muhammad as effectively both Jesus and the Holy Spirit. You'll find this. It sounds crazy, but once you read it, you'll find that Muhammad is the counterfeit Jesus. He is the Holy Spirit. He is effectively a partner of Allah.
Okay, terrific stuff. Listen, now it all makes sense. I can see now why they are the way they are and why they are imposing these laws. But folks, this is not something to trifle with. This is what's going to come to your country if you allow Islam to come in a big way. If you allow it to come both politically and theologically, the two are melded together. They do not separate the two. They come in as one group. And as a result, what they see as their prophet as being sacrosanct, that he is above any error, then you can see why these laws are all there to make sure that he remains there. You cannot criticize him. You cannot mock him on pain of death. All right. This is hard stuff to go through. It's Lloyd, thanks for bringing it and helping us and unpacking it and also showing its relevancy for us today in the 21st century. All right, there's Lloyd in Poland and me here in the United States. Over and out.
Goodbye.